All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today's session. I am Michaela Peck, Distance Learning and Training Officer from the Office of Distance Learning. We're also joined by Mrs. Kamala Anderson, who is the Instructional Design Specialist from the Office of Distance Learning as well. We will be both responsible for conducting today's session. I will start off, thereafter Mrs. Anderson will pick up. Okay, so like other persons are joining this session, but we're just going to get started, go right into it. So in last week's session, we looked at, it was conducted by Mrs. Anderson, and she delved into creation of assignments and groups. So I trust everyone was able to attend. If you missed last week's session, you can always check back the live recording, and we're actually encouraging lecturers, all faculty members, to use the online training modules. This is the space within which you're able to demonstrate your understanding of what you have learned, right? And of course, because all training modules are online, you can go ahead, take the different learning activities, and receive badges upon successful completion of each unit and certificates upon successful completion of each training module. Three training modules are on the UTech online site: basic, intermediate, and advanced. And if you had attended previous training sessions or registered for any of the training sessions, you would have been manually enrolled to these online training modules. So you would have access. To know if you have access to these training modules, you simply log into UTech Online and the modules will be shown on your dashboard. If these are modules that you're not seeing on your dashboard, you can send me an email or Mrs. Anderson, and we will manually enroll you to these training modules. All right, so I'm going to quickly share my screen just to show you what these training modules look like. All right, so I'll just be doing a quick demonstration of the intermediate training session online. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen now. Good. This is what the Moodle Intermediate Training Online looks like. It has an introduction to the course, important course information, important course documents. Once you scroll down, you see the different units. From the start of the series of training sessions for the summer, the first session looked at the basic training module, which is MBT 1001. Thereafter, we started to go through the different sections of the intermediate training session. Unit 1 looked at tools for collaboration and more. Unit 2 looked at tools for content presentation. And at the top of each unit, you will see the training session associated with that unit. All right, so last week we looked at assignment and groups. The training session recording was uploaded for that unit. And for this week, we're looking at ensuring originality in students' work using TurnItIn, and the training session recording will be uploaded here as well. Okay, so remember, we are not emailing recordings to lecturers or anybody at all for these training sessions. We want persons to take the initiative to actually go into the online training modules to access the recordings and also to complete the different units that are contained in the training modules. Okay, now throughout today's session, if you have any questions at all, you can either leave them in the chat. If you're looking at my screen, bottom center of my screen, there are 4 icons. We have one icon for status and settings, one for mic, one for video, one that allows you to raise your hand. If you want to use your mic instead of using the chat, you can always click to raise your hand, wait to be acknowledged, and then you'd activate your mic. All right. And apologies for the mirrored screen. That's because I'm viewing my actual Blackboard Collaborate screen creates that effect. All right. If you prefer to use the chat, you click bottom right on the purple panel. It's the Collaborate panel. Click on the chat icon and you can type your message here. Okay. Now, as mentioned, today's session will look at ensuring originality in students' work. You want to ensure that when students do submit their assignments, they are not submitting somebody else's work, right? This is their work. Now, TurnItIn, which you might or might not be familiar with, it is known as a web-based similarity detection tool, and it is used to compare students' work with what is in Turnitin's database. And of course, this is in an effort to detect similarity and to ensure that originality is within a student's assignment, or to ensure originality rather within students' assignment. And of course, this helps to promote academic integrity, and the system as well. The Turnitin system also has added features that are actually used to streamline grading and feedback, and also for improving students' outcomes. Now, before we begin to look at how to set up and configure the Turnitin tool in your course, just going to quickly share with us what the handbook has to say. So students' handbook, what it has to say about plagiarism, how it defines plagiarism, what it has to say about it. So in section 3.2.2, offenses committed outside of an exam, point B states plagiarism is presenting any material, whether in written or electronic form, that is attributable to or the property of another person's as one's own work, without acknowledging the source from which material is taken. Merely changing the words in someone else's work still constitutes plagiarism. This includes in whole or in part, but is not limited to the following materials: articles, essays, journals, diagrams, graphs, tables, and the list goes on. All right, and it says some ways of avoiding plagiarism includes using direct quotations, paraphrasing with acknowledgement of the source, for example, URL addresses, author, year, publisher, and page where it is possible. All right, it goes on to say representing as one's individual writing and or final product, a jointly written or produced submission of any description, unless the instructor has approved a co-authored submission. All right, so these can be found on pages 192 and page 193, and it's also good for students' attention to be directed to these two pages in the handbook. I know that students don't sit to go through the handbook in its entirety, but there are several areas of the handbook that are very important in terms of students' knowledge of the contents of what is there. All right, so just wanted to point that out to us. And TurnItIn, I need to make this clear, TurnItIn detects similarity, so not necessarily plagiarism. So I'm not saying that TurnItIn cannot detect plagiarism. It can. However, while it is being marketed as a plagiarism tool, we have had sessions, in prior times with the company, TurnItIn, and they have made it clear that it is a similarity detection tool, and that the reports that TurnItIn returns are similarity reports, which means it is searching for similar content between what is in TurnItIn's database, or what we call the standard repository, and the student's paper that is being evaluated. All right, so this may be quotes, citations, references, and more. Similar content does not immediately or automatically mean that the student has plagiarized. I believe personally that in an effort to detect plagiarism, human evaluation is required and is very important. And it's not just something that we want to leave entirely up to a software. All right. So we're going to begin. As usual, we normally use the Moodle demonstration course every week for the different demonstrations that we do. I'm already in the course. I already have editing turned on, and you would scroll to the section of your course that you want to add the Turnitin activity to. Okay, so I'm going to add it to the last unit in this course by clicking on add an activity or resource. Okay, and under activities, we're looking for Turnitin. So you'll see it as Turnitin assignment 2. All right, so this is the only Turnitin assignment activity. You would click on it, good. And we are going to be giving our assignment a name. Okay, so we are going to call this demo experimenting assignments. Okay, all right, and then in the summary section, you can actually give students a description in relation to what it is that they're required to submit. All right, so the summary box can be used for that. And if it is that you want this summary to be displayed on the course page, you can tick the little box that appears below the summary. Now we're down to submission type, and TurnItIn allows for your students to submit files. So this could be a Word document, well, it could be a PDF document, sorry. It could be a PowerPoint document, or it could be a case where the students are actually typing their assignments within TurnItIn. All right, so if it is that you prefer for your students to type their assignment or copy and paste, then you could select text submission, or if it is that you prefer for them to upload a file, you'd select file upload, or if it is that you want them to have the option of both, you would use the selection any submission type. Okay, number of parts. Now, the Turnitin assignment can hold up to 5 parts. How is this typically used? It is used in a case where, let's say you want students to submit their, let's say it's an essay, but you want them to submit it in multiple sections. So for instance, you want for them to submit the introduction of the essay first, and then you want them to probably submit the body and then the conclusion. In that case, you could select 3 parts, right? If it is that you just want to select one part, even for the entire essay, you can. All right, but if you prefer to have it structured where they submit each part for testing of the same assignment, you could select multiple parts. I'm going to stick to one part, because for each part that you do select, you have to specify open due date and post date, which we will look at shortly. Maximum file size, this is for the upload that they are making. The site upload limit is 100 MB, so we're going to let that stay as is. Allow submission of any file type. Now, not sure if I had mentioned already, but Turnitin does not test images. All right, so that basically means that it cannot scan images, only text is being analyzed and compared to what is in their database. So if the student tries to submit a picture and it matches something on the internet, the system won't be able to detect that. All right, for this, I'm going to select no. Okay, our next option, do you want to display similarity reports to students? Now, this is the report that Turnitin returns after the student has made submission of their assignment to the system. So do you want students to be able to see what percentage of similarity is detected and the sources from which similarity is being detected? Yes or no? I'm going to select yes. If at any point in time you get lost, you feel confused, you need help, you're not sure what these fields are requiring of you, as with every activity and resource in Moodle, you can always click on the question mark and it will tell you what that is asking of you. All right, we have a hand raised. Okay, somebody's saying the sound is muffled. Sorry about that, Mrs. Williamson. Anybody else is having that too?
I'm hearing you clearly, but I have a question.
That's Miss Hall.
Yes, I'm hearing you clearly.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, you said that students upon submitting their work, they turn it in, we can give them the option of seeing what level of similarity there is, right?
Right.
Will they at that point be able to take back the work? If suppose it is too high, can they take back the work, make the necessary correction, then resubmit, or they don't have that option?
Yes, they do, but it all has to do with how you have configured the
We
system.
can
So
do
we're
it like that.
getting,
Okay.
right, we're getting to that point, but
Okay.
yes, that is an option. But we'll explore that shortly.
All right, thanks.
All right. Yes, Mrs. Williamson, I'm using headphones. Yeah, I'm not sure why. Well, I'm not saying you're the only person not hearing me clearly, but I'm not sure why some persons are hearing me clearly and some are not. Okay. All right. All right. So I do have a fan on, but it's a bit of a distance away from me, but I'm gonna turn it a little bit. All right. So I hope that helps some. All right. I hope that is a little bit better. Let me know, Miss Williamson, before I continue, if that's better. It is a little bit clearer now. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. All right. So we're going to continue. All right, so we have opted to display the similarity report to students. Grade display, how do you want the grade to be displayed to the student, as a percentage or as a fraction? I personally prefer the percentage view, but clearly that is up to you. All right. Do you want the system to automatically refresh similarity scores and grades once you have applied a setting change? Yes, I leave that as yes. And if you want these um, settings that we have just selected to be stored as assignment defaults, you can tick this box. What this basically means is that for every Turnitin assignment that you do create, these would be the options that are selected for you by the system, because we have ticked this little box here. All right. Okay, so let's continue down to grade. Under grade, you can select the display of the grade, so scale or point. I'm going to let point stay as the option that we're using here. Maximum grade, what is the maximum grade for this assignment? So it could be 25, it could be 75, it could be 100. As a lecturer, you get to determine what the maximum grade is for this particular assessment. So by default, the system has 100, so we will let that stay as is. Grade category. So this has to do with gradebook configurations. We have an upcoming session, I believe to be next week. Next week, yes, which will look at the gradebook, setting up the gradebook. Quickly though, I'll tell you that the grade category has to do with you modifying the gradebook to include folders that will house different grade items. Grade items being activities, assessments, resources, right? So what would happen is, if I have a grade category called assignment, I could store all assignments I've created in my course under that grade category. So clearly there is no gradebook there's no grade category set up in this course, so that is the reason why the system is not giving me an option to select one, but we'll look at that next week. And of course, grade to pass, you can enter how much it is that the student is required to get to actually pass this assignment. So it may be 50, 60, you get to enter that here. Okay, so I'm just going to delete that because I do not want to enter a grade to pass. We're down now to the assignment part. All right, so part one here, you are allowed to change the name. Okay, so if you want, you could use the same name as the assignment, or if this is just a part of the entire assignment, you could put what that part is. So this could be the conclusion, the introduction, or the body. You get to enter the name here. You also have the option of setting the start date and time, due date and time, post date and time. So by default, the system has today's date. Okay, so I'm gonna just change this to 12 midday. Due date 7 days later, I let that stay as is. And the post date, can anybody tell me what the post date is? Anybody knows what the post date is? Anybody wants to guess? I'm going to set the post date to the 16th. Does anybody have any idea what the post date is, or anybody wants to try?
Usually when you want to give a time outside of the due date, some additional time, that's the cutoff point for submission.
Okay. Okay, anybody else wants to try? Thanks for that, Dr. Melville. Dr. Telf, I see your hand is up.
I believe that's the date that you indicate when you are giving feedback to the students.
Okay, all right. Miss March, would you like to try as well?
Okay, you can set the assignment, but the post date is when the students will actually see it and have access to
Okay.
it.
Okay. All right, so we received 3 different responses, and I thank you for answering my question. But the correct response is thanks for attempting to try the correct responses, and I believe Dr. Telfa got it correct. This is when you are allowing the system to release the students' grade and feedback to them. All right, so due date is totally different from the post date. So the post date has to do, so let's say you have received the student's assignment on the 14th. Rather, you have marked their assignment on the 14th, but you don't want them to see your grades and your feedback until the 16th. You would set that as a post date, and even though you have entered their grades and feedback on the 14th, the system won't allow them to see that until the post date, which is when their grades and feedback are posted to them. All right, so I hope that's clear. Okay, let's move on down to similarity report options. Very important area, so pay close attention. Are you allowing students to submit after the due date? Remember, we have a due date set up here, but are you allowing them to submit after this due date? Yes or no? When submissions are made late to the system, whether it's an assignment or Turnitin assignment, because this what we're doing now is different from what Mrs. Anderson demonstrated last week. Whether it's assignment or Turnitin assignment, the system marks the assignment as late. As a matter of fact, the student for both assignment types are able to see that their submission is late because it comes up in red when they're making their submission that they're 2 days late, 3 days late, or a couple hours late, and it actually is highlighted in red for them to see. All right, and also as the markup, you are able to see that the student has had submitted late, and it also is highlighted in red, and it shows how many days late or how many hours late the student actually made their submission. So if you want to allow submissions after the due date, the system will show you how late the student actually submitted. All right, so I'm going to click on yes. Okay, and next we have report generation speed. Okay, and this is similar to a question asked earlier. This is looking at how quickly students will receive the similarity report from Turnitin. All right, now there are 3 options. Generate reports immediately. So the system sends the similarity report to the student immediately. Well, it doesn't send them, it's displayed on the system immediately, but the students cannot resubmit their assignment regardless of what the outcome is. That's 1. 2, reports are generated immediately, but the students can resubmit until the due date. But after their first 3 submissions, the reports are now being generated after 24 hours. All right. And then the third option, reports are generated only on the due date, and students can submit or resubmit rather up until the due date. So typically, I think the more or most lenient option and the one most widely used is reports are generated immediately. Students can resubmit until the due date. All right. Okay. Now next we're looking at store students paper. Okay. Now from the drop down here, there are 2 options. It's really yes or no. No repository means that the system will not store the student's paper. Standard repository means yes, the student's paper will be stored as part of Turnitin's repository and database, which means that other students' paper will get checked against what is being stored in the repository. Okay, so When do we advise that you select no? We advise you select no when you are actually allowing students just to test, probably like a draft submission. Because if it is a final submission, it is stored, and then, well, if it is a, let me say that again. I think I just confused myself and you a little bit. We advise that you allow for them to store when it is their final submission and not a draft submission. If it is a draft submission, more than likely they'll make a final submission after, and the system will have two occurrences of the same paper. So the second time that they submit, it will ring up more than likely as 100% similarity. Okay. What we do have, and this is something that we refer lecturers to refer their students to, is a test Turnitin module, which we'll look at shortly. The test Turnitin module allows students to upload their work for testing, and it is set up where it does not store the students' work. Right, so they can submit as much as they want and then come back to their lecturer scores to make their final submission, and the paper will not be checked against itself. Okay, so what I'm going to do in this case, I'm going to select no repository. All right, so this basically means that the paper will not be stored. So we advise this only for final paper submissions. All right, Mrs. Anderson, you can take the mic.
Afternoon, Miss Peck. Afternoon, everyone. Just a quick question, Miss Peck. If so, you mentioned Turnitin test module, which you're going to demonstrate shortly. But if the lecturers
Mhm.
did not want that, if they didn't want them to necessarily leave the course, would they be able to create two occurrences of the Turnitin, one with a test and one without?
Right. Right. So yes, right. So yes, if it is that you prefer to keep the students within your course, and that is fine, you can create multiple or two Turnitin activities. You can add them to a section of the course and point students to the section. So if that is what you're doing, then you would have to highlight, probably using the name section, probably put in brackets that this is for submission of their draft paper, right? And then in the settings now, you would configure for it not to store the paper. So you would choose no repository, and then you would have another Turnitin assignment activity Dropbox, where students are able to make their submission for their final paper. And then in that case, you would actually select standard repository, which means yes, the students' papers are being stored. All right, so that is how we could facilitate that. All right, that answers that, Mrs. Anderson.
Yes, Miss Peck. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Telfo, you can take the mic.
If it's the same assignment with the same title and everything, why did I think the system would replace the old one? Does the system
Mm,
do that?
no, not to my
Okay.
knowledge. No, never had that experience before.
Okay.
No. And when you said the
That's what
same
happened.
title, you mean the same name of the assignment? That's what you're referring to?
So if you set it so that the student can upload more than once, and the student uploads, see what the similarity report looks like, maybe makes modifications and re-uploads to just to ensure that the similarity report is good. I don't know. I thought the system would have replaced the older version.
Oh, no, I'm not aware of that. Mrs. Anderson?
Right. What would happen in that situation if you're using the same
Miss
assignment?
Anderson, you're very low. I'm
You're
sorry.
low. You're really low,
I'm not
yeah.
hearing you.
Can you hear me now? Any better now?
A little bit better,
A
yeah.
toots.
Okay. Yeah, try to move the mic a little closer. Right. What I was saying is that if it's the same Dropbox, then you would come back. It would come back with 100% similarity. So you wouldn't be able to use the same Dropbox. If you're using the same Dropbox, it would replace it each time. If you say no repository, because remember, it wouldn't be stored. But um once you say it should be once you say standard repository, and if the student tries to submit again, even, and just to give you an idea, because I actually experienced this. So let us say you create a Turnitin in your class, right? And this actually happened to me with a student. And the student does not tries to test their Turnitin in another repository, in another Dropbox that says standard repository. It's going to come back in your Dropbox that says standard repository as 100%. So once you are allowing them to test, you must say no repository and then have a separate Dropbox that says standard repository. So that section that says store student papers is going to be critical because that is what is going to allow them to so because it's not storing it, it's not basically, it's not replacing it, it's actually just
Right.
checking it independently each time. So once you say no repository, it's not storing it against anything else. But once you say standard repository, even if the student uses another Turnitin site, it's going to come up as 100%.
Right. Right. That is correct. Um, okay. Audio is too low. Okay. I'm assuming you meant for Mrs. Anderson with her explanation just now, Miss Williamson. Right.
Can
Sorry
you
about
repeat
that.
for us, please? It's
They,
very, very low.
could you repeat that, Miss Hall?
I could hardly hear what was being said, and as if it could be repeated
All right,
further.
Mrs. Anderson, I'm gonna continue and just ask you to quickly type what you said in the chat. All right. All right. Okay, so I'm asking Mrs. Anderson to type what she said in the chat briefly, and then I'll continue. Okay. Now we just looked at storing students' paper. All right. We are selecting no repository, and we explained the difference between the standard repository and no repository. However, we have another option here that says check against stored students' paper. All right, and I have to make it clear that this is different from storing students' papers. Lecturers normally ask what the difference is. So the option that we just looked at has to do with storage of your students' paper, the students who will attempt this particular Turnitin Dropbox assignment. Checking against stored students' paper has to do with papers that are already stored in Turnitin's repository, papers already in the database. All right, so this is in no way tied to this. So if it is that we have yes here, this means that your students' paper, all right, whether it's going to be stored or not, it will be checked against what is already existing in Turnitin's database. Okay, so we're going to select yes for this particular option. All right, and then we have check against the internet, check against third-party sources like journals, periodicals, and publications. You want to have that as yes. Okay, I actually can't think of a situation where we would put no for checking against the internet and third-party sources. Has there ever been any situation for any lecturer where you have opted to not check against the internet or check against journals, periodicals, and publications? Because what is in Turnitin's database is primarily from different universities using Turnitin. That is what helps to build their repository, right? But I can't think of, I don't want to tell you to put no at any point, but I can't think particularly of any case that would allow me to put no, because it does a comprehensive check on the internet. All right. And then we have, do you want to exclude the bibliography from being checked for similarity? Do you want to exclude quoted material from being checked? So it's important to show, or for the system to highlight, how much quoted material is being used and how much original material is being used. So quoted material has to do with probably a citation that is being made in the student's work. It's surrounded by double quotes. So it's basically them using somebody else's work, but of course making a reference for it. Or it doesn't have to be in double quotes. It could be anything that is indented to the right, any word that is indented to the right that the system detects. All right, so I'm going to select no, I do not want to exclude my bibliography from being checked. No, I do not want to exclude quoted material from being checked, which means that the system will check them as well for similarity. We have as well, do you want to exclude small matches from being checked? Okay, So small matches, these are words that occur back to back in the same order. So for example, I normally use the example of a student's cover page. Let me see if okay, this is not one here. Just gonna bring up, okay. So look at this cover page. It has University of the West Indies Open Campus, Capstone Part 2 Internship, TLET 6985, Individual Assignment Final Report Component A. This is about 10 to 12 words. All right. Now, this is what the system calls small matches. If every single student has these set of words occurring back to back on their cover page, this does not necessarily indicate that the student is plagiarizing. Right? These are just words that the students would be using as part of, the correct format for their cover page. And in my time, of course, my colleagues or my classmates and I would have had the same setup on our cover page. All right, so what we try to do to exclude the system, bringing this up as plagiarism, right, is to exclude matches of about 10 words. The option of percent is there. I have tested it before and it wasn't very useful for me. I know persons use the option percent, but I would recommend the use of excluding small matches of 10 words. Some persons go up to 15. I think that's a bit much because remember, you don't get to choose exactly where in your document it is excluding the small matches from. Sorry. So every 10 words that occur back to back to back, if it is detected somewhere else on the internet or from another student's paper, then the system is going to mark it as similarity being detected. All right. Okay. And yes, that is a good question, Dr. Telfer. Including the bibliography, it increases, I don't know about the unnecessarily part, but it increases the similarity index. So what I advise, if it is that you are actually including that, what I advise is that you look at or eyeball the student's assignment just to do your own checks, because yes, it is going to ring up as being higher, but I advise that you look through and there are options after you have actually made this configuration. There are options that you can change in terms of filter for you to exclude the bibliography from being a part of the percentage. So you get to pick and choose sections of the student's assignment that you want to be excluded. All right, so we look at that shortly. Okay, now below this we have grade mark options. We're not going to be looking at the rubric here. After we have actually created this assignment and uploaded a student's assignment, we want to show you how you can attach the rubric manager. Well, you can attach a rubric using the rubric manager to the student's assignment. These are the most important options, I would say. Once you have these entered, we know about restriction of access, we know about common module settings, activity completion. We don't want to look at those. We are going to scroll down, click on save and display. Okay, so while that is saving, our next move is to actually upload an assignment. Oops. All right, so this is saying my connection has timed out. Continue. Let's just try that again. All right, so our next step is to upload a student's assignment, and we are going to be looking at and interpreting the similarity report that TurnItIn returns. Okay, we're also going to be looking at how you can apply your feedback to the student's work using quick marks, how you can create your own comments, how you can enter voice comments, and how you can upload or create a rubric in the system. All right, let me just open another page up. Not sure if UTech Online is down. Dr. Telfer, yes, you can go ahead in the meanwhile.
Thank you. I'm interested, Michaela, in group assignments. Is that enabled in TurnItIn right now? So if the students are supposed to submit in groups.
If it is enabled,
Yeah, because I tried it some time ago, but I didn't see the option for them to set up a group assignment.
no, but what you can do, you can create restrictions. You can create group restrictions to the activity itself.
So if
But
I
there is no option for group. There's no particular option for group submission settings within Turnitin.
so if I grade, but okay. So if I put restrictions on a group assignment and I grade in Turnitin, does it apply the grades to everybody in the group?
Right, so it would apply the grades to the students in the group. So group A
Oh, the
students would
restrictions will do
receive,
that.
right,
Okay.
because these are the restrictions that you said. So only those groups would be able to access those assignments or that assignment.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Miss Peck, are you hearing me?
Yes, I hope you're not going to tell me
Okay.
that UTEC is down.
That's exactly what I'm going to tell you. Sorry to be the bearer
Oh
of
my
bad news.
gosh. All right. Okay. Yeah, because I opened another tab and was trying it, but I realized it's not loading either ways. Okay. All right. Right, the official website seems to be down as well, so it's
Right.
not just UTech online, yeah.
Right. What we can do though, I mean, obviously this is not the way we'd want the session to end, but we do have a number of videos, including training from the actual Turnitin team from last year. So for the persons who registered for today's session, well, we can put up those videos under the unit as well, and then we can try to continue this session at another time. But we can definitely upload those Turnitin training videos on the intermediate site. So
Yeah.
that when this site comes back up, you can review that, and then we can have a follow-up session later on, because the site definitely seems to be down.
Yes, I am sorry about that. Somebody has shared a useful link as well. Miss March has shared a useful link in the chat. Thanks for that, Miss March. Looks at the feedback studio. Yes. Yeah, so the site is down, and not just UTech Online clearly. Possibly it's most of UTech online systems, sorry, are down at current. So as a result of that, we would not be able to proceed with today's session, since the platform that we're using um, is UTech Online. All right, so my deepest apologies, not sure what's happening, but I want to thank everyone for attending the session nevertheless, though prematurely ended. Miss March, you can take the mic.
This has nothing to do with what we're doing.
Okay.
In Moodle, we can create short answer questions, but when we create the short answer questions, we have to put in possible answers. There is a type, I was trying to find the exact name, that allows us to use natural language processing to help with this, to process the student's answer, instead of
Okay.
just matching exactly what we type. So I wanted to
Okay.
suggest if you could explore it to see if that's something we could get in Moodle.
Okay. So Miss March, could you send me an email on that? I'd appreciate that.
Oh, okay, will do.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Another hand is raised. I think whose hand was raised first? I'm not sure. Mr. Gordon Ward, Dr. Telfo.
I think my hand was first. Good afternoon.
Okay, go ahead, sir. Good
This
afternoon.
has nothing to do with what you're doing either. I like how Miss Marsh introduced her topic. What
Okay.
are the university's plans for returning to full face-to-face interaction? Has the
Okay.
university recognized that there are serious quality issues in their pursuit for continued online learning?